Hey guys, I'm back to talk about Sam Raimi's latest film, Send Help, starring Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. I had a chance to see this a few days ago, and for some reason I missed its original release date, which was a few days before I saw this. Now, of course, I saw the previews for it, but for some reason I must have missed the available showing in my local theaters. Where I live, I don't exactly have quick access to advanced screenings, if you know what I mean. And this past week for me has been quite a roller coaster emotionally. I'll get to that later on towards the end of the video. But like I said, I had a chance to see it a few nights ago, and I was kind of blown away, if I'm being honest with you. Now, for anyone who is new to my channel, horror is not exactly my go-to genre, but ever since I saw Sinners last year, I felt the need to kind of spread my wings or expand my horizons. And I also want to try to stay relevant in some way, to the best of my ability. And the fact that it was Sam Raimi behind the director's chair, someone that I've actually really respected as a filmmaker ever since his Spider-Man trilogy when I was 12 years old, I thought, you know what? Why not? In my estimation, this movie was pretty wild. It's a dark comedy horror film where these two people are stranded on a deserted island and they have to find a way to survive, both played by Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. To be real with you guys, this actually kind of surprises me that this is a Sam Raimi film. He doesn't exactly have a distinct aesthetic look, as opposed to some people like David Fincher or Tim Burton, or even somebody like Chris Nolan, where you see how the color tone looks and it's pretty clear who's in the director's chair. Now, not every filmmaker has to have that kind of color tone, but there's certain trademarks or certain styles of humor that are present throughout here. If you're familiar with Sam Raimi's work, you can pick up on it pretty quickly. And a lot of the zaniness and weird, quirky humor is sprinkled quite a bit throughout this movie that at first I found it kind of jarring, but after a while I was able to adjust to it. I'd say on my end, it was a lot more in your face in comparison to his Spider-Man trilogy or even Oz the Great and Powerful and Multiverse of Madness. Now, I have to admit, I haven't seen all of his filmography. I know he's famous for things like Evil Dead, Drag Me to Hell, or The Quick and the Dead, but I've seen enough of his work to get an idea of what his style is like. His style is definitely not for everybody though, and I can totally understand why some people might push back on it, but he does have a way of making certain things feel grounded, even if it's really cheesy and campy, like hands popping out of the ground or from off frame, latching onto a surface like a table or the sand with the fingers clawing through the dirt. It's really zany and weird, but he has a good way of making them feel grounded. And there's certain moments like that in this movie. I won't get into too much specifics in case anybody hasn't seen it yet, but there is a shot where a certain character finds somebody else with their hands sticking out of the ground right by the water. This is not the only time, of course, that Sam Raimi has done something like this. I'm more than certain he's done it at least a few times in the Evil Dead series, or Drag Me to Hell, but there is something like that in Oz the Great and Powerful, or even this moment in Spider-Man 2. And there's a certain clean look to this whole thing. It almost kind of reminded me of The Crystal Skull. Only difference is, it's not as clean and fresh looking as that movie was. That's why it was kind of jarring for me at first to realize that this was a Sam Raimi film. But then as I saw most of his trademark humor and style and writing and certain camera angles that he throws in here, then I was able to really see, okay, his footprints are all over this. And particularly when Rachel's character Linda is hunting a boar on the island. We see a POV shot from the boar's perspective, just like this moment in Spider-Man 2 in the hospital scene. That was the one moment for me that made me go, oh, there he is. Now that I think about it, I think in a way it was like a feature-length version of an episode of Survivor. And Linda is a really big fan of the show Survivor. They make fun of her for her audition to show up in the show Survivor. Again, I'm trying to be light on the spoilers, but I guess that does kind of account for the more cleaner look than what you've come to expect in Raimi's other projects. On that note, as far as all the other movies I've seen him do, even if some of the CG shots in the Spider-Man trilogy don't look the best, they all look really good. From what I've heard, he's never made a bad looking movie. In fact, the cinematographer for this movie is Bill Pope, who also collaborated with Sam Raimi on Spider-Man 2. Segueing into the story and character side of things, Rachel McAdams I actually quite like in this role. Her character, Linda, I found to be very cringe-inducing and really awkward to watch. I almost kind of fear that this is going to be a Jamie Foxx, Max Dillon situation from Amazing Spider-Man 2. But there's a moment she has to herself in the car after she embarrasses herself at work, that she does some sort of a pick-me-up speech to herself. One of those things where one moment I felt uncomfortable around her, then to the next moment I actually kind of felt sorry for her. And throughout the movie, she gets a lot more confident and starts to come out of her shell when certain things happen. I guess she's kind of like Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, a savant who's really good with numbers and coming up with these different variables and constants in certain scenarios. And she's able to actually kind of impress Bradley, played by Dylan O'Brien, when certain things happen on the island, like with the food, taking shelter from the rain. Even though he can't stand her and wants to get away from her, he actually kind of comes to respect her in a way. But with Rachel McAdams, this is actually a very different character than I've seen her play. I've seen her in movies like Mean Girls, The Family Stone, both Doctor Strange films, Southpaw, Wedding Crashers, and Sherlock Holmes. She does have a similar style or vibe that she gives off in most of her projects, and it drives me crazy when I hear people say they play the same character in every movie. Look, everybody's got their way of doing things. If that bothers you, well, that's your problem. I don't really have a predisposition for any particular actor or actress personally. At least in my experience, this is a different flavor that I've seen from her. And to see how calculating and smart she really is by the finale, again, no spoilers, it kind of threw me for a loop. And I thought, okay, good job. Then there's Dylan O'Brien. This and Deepwater Horizon are the only movies I've seen him do. I don't remember him much in Deepwater Horizon, and I should probably do my homework and see what he's like in other movies. But his character is one of those people that you just love to hate. And I think he's actually able to ride that line just right without coming off as too insufferable. Because Bradley is practically spoiled rotten to the core. But there is a reason for that, as they explain in the movie, and he's able to connect with Linda in a way and how they both have ghosts that have been haunting them for many years, which all comes to a head in the finale. I also find it kind of funny that Dylan O'Brien is in a Sam Raimi movie, because Raimi's famous for his Spider-Man trilogy, and for anyone who may not know, Dylan O'Brien was one of the main contenders to play Spider-Man in the MCU back in the day, before they gave it to Tom Holland. I'm actually kind of glad that they didn't go with him. Someone who I don't believe for a second would come off as a nerdy outcast like Peter Parker does. Nothing against the guy, but neither here nor there. I'm just saying that I found that to be kind of an interesting matchup, if you get what I mean. And I think the two leads managed to bounce off each other really well. Surprisingly, they think they're perfectly matched with Sam Raimi's style. Side note, and I know the IGN review has pointed this out as well, Linda would fit in perfectly with Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker in the first Spider-Man because of how awkward and reclusive she is. Even to the point where she has a little bit of food on the side of her face, to the point where the camera just zooms in on her face and how Dylan O'Brien's character just can't get past the fact that she's so unaware of what she's doing. This would be like Harry Osborn if he was a bully towards Peter Parker. If you're also wondering, is Bruce Campbell in this movie? Not exactly. There's a portrait of him in an office that Bradley works in, and I believe it's Bradley's father. But I guess maybe because of timing he wasn't able to do it. I don't know exactly what the reason was. But even then, his presence is still somewhat there in the background. Literally, anyway. And even Danny Elfman does the score for this one, which I have to admit, doesn't really stick out to me. If there's any problems I have with the movie, I guess it's really that. Danny Elfman, I think, is one of the best film composers in the industry. There's certain moments where I think he manages to elevate the excitement and the tension, but throughout the movie, I didn't really notice much else that stood out to me. I realize I'm kind of jumping around, but the plane crash that happens towards the middle of the movie, where they end up on the island, I couldn't help but wonder if it was somewhat of a nod to Castaway when Tom Hanks goes down in the FedEx plane in the ocean. Definitely not the same way it happens, but there is a moment or two where I thought, is Sam Raimi making a nod to that? Surprisingly, that sequence was actually kind of intense. Goes to show you that Sam hasn't lost his touch. So yeah, Send Help was a really good time. I don't know if I would watch it again or own it on 4K or Blu-ray. Maybe I just don't gravitate towards that kind of style. And there's also some blood that shows up in here involving the boar. Again, I'm being light on the details, but we don't have to get into that. This is a really fun time. If you're a fan of Sam Raimi, I can easily see this being the movie for you. If you're looking for something different than what you usually see at the movies, I would recommend this to you. If anything, you get to see Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien going at each other. If you're open to that, you won't exactly be disappointed. So that's all I have for you on Send Help. Thank you guys so much for watching. Just comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. Also, I do want to ask you to bear with me as I try to get back into the swing of things because, well, long story short, about 2 weeks ago, my grandma passed away from a stroke. We had a funeral for her this past Wednesday. Kind of threw a wrench into my schedule of putting certain reviews out on here, and I just needed some time to really let some emotions out. But not to worry, I'm doing okay, all things considered. Just bear with me as I try to get back into the rhythm. Thanks again, guys, for watching. Just let me know what your thoughts are on this movie down below, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Later!